Rusty, if you could help.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Ed. First of all, I just can't tell you guys how inspired I've been the last couple days getting to talk to each of you and hearing your stories up here. So thanks for being here. It's been really great to get to know you. So I want to do a few different things this afternoon. You guys have probably heard 1,000 different things as it relates to social media. And typically when I talk to business owners, marketing executives, etc., the issue right now is not sort of options within social media. It's the fact that there's literally almost an infinite amount of things that you could be doing with your time. And so I want to talk with you a little bit today about some of the things that we have found to be most effective for people like yourselves, who many of you are really looking not necessarily to go out to the masses, but really to reach kind of key influencers and key executives and people who can open the door to keynotes and coaching and consulting work. So we've talked a lot the last couple of days about how the world sees you and how to share your anthem and be your best self. Well, the reality is today, how the world sees you more often than not is happening here on your website or when somebody pulls out their smartphone and they're looking at your Twitter feed. So the reality is the first place that most people interact with you and your brand is not in person. It's online. And so what I want you guys to be thinking about this afternoon as I sort of walk through these steps is, if somebody has referred me to you and I head online and I pop your name into Google and I search, first of all, can I find you? And if I can find you, when I get to your website, is what I find there going to reflect the quality of your brand that we've talked about the last couple of days? So is it going to encourage me to pick up the phone and make a call, or is it going to dissuade me from doing that based on what I find? So I want to walk through a few different things on the agenda. Most importantly, I want to give you guys what you're looking for. So I want to go through some specific ideas, and then I want to do most of this on Q&A so that we get right at what you're looking for. I want to start out and talk a little bit about kind of where we are right now, changing world of PR and marketing. We think of it as if we're in the age of micromedia right now, individuals and brands as media outlets. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we got here and what I think is huge opportunity for everybody here. If you're wanting to think more like a media executive than a marketer, you're going to have a real opportunity to control the size of your audience much more than just having to rent space via ads or hope that you can get earned media. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to walk you through how to do an online brand audit. So going back to that example I just gave, if I pop your name into Google, what's coming up? How does your website look? And I want to walk you guys through best practices from our perspective of what we want to see on your website. Number 3, I want to walk through a few things within social media, the things that I think for each of you, if you're only going to do a couple of things, these are the things that are going to move the needle the most for you. And then I want to leave you with just a few thoughts on how to use data to your advantage. There's huge opportunities out there right now with the amount of data that's available, and there are a few different things that you guys can do if you use it the right way that I think will be a nice way for you guys to drive many more inbound leads to yourself. So welcome to the age of micromedia. So when I started out in PR, right out of University of Texas 10 years ago, literally my first job, I was in charge of calling and booking our clients on radio interviews, TV interviews, print interviews. And at that time, this was before social media. And what we would do is we would order, some of you guys that have been in PR and marketing remember this, we would order from Bacon's Media Database a stack of binders that would come in and that would look kind of similar to this. And if we were pitching media in Denver, we would thumb through, we would find Denver, we would look for drive time radio, and if a producer moved, we were whiting out their name, writing in the new name, literally like the dark ages of PR. And so at that time, there were a lot of what we might think of as traditional media outlets, local radio stations, local newspapers. Back then, they still had staff there locally to where they were doing a lot more local coverage. Many of you guys that still take the newspaper probably noticed that a lot of the stories that are in local newspapers are really coming in now from wire services. So they're piped in. The number of local reporters has really shrunk. Forrester Research did a study that said between the years 2000 and 2008, 1 in 4 media jobs disappeared. So that's an old stat. The reason I keep bringing that stat up is 1 in 4 jobs disappearing before the recession. And so most people put that number past half right now. So as a result of that, you have fewer people in the newsroom that are tasked with covering more stories than ever before. We've all heard all the statistics about disappearing print, disappearing traditional media. Our colleague Barbara Henricks gives an example that I really like about kind of that old media environment. So what she says is, in that old media environment where we had New York Times, Oprah Winfrey, Good Morning America, we still have these places and they're still valuable, but at that time, think about them as major boulders kind of encircling the public. And if they didn't decide to let something in other words, if they didn't decide to talk about something, we had to go to a lot of dinner parties or a lot of in-person events to hear about it. And so at that time, they literally controlled the airwaves, they controlled the amount of information that got out. So enter social media, enter the internet, and those took essentially sledgehammers to those boulders. And so what's happened is our attention has scattered now across millions and millions of pebbles that have sort of scattered around here. And this is what we think of as the age of micromedia. So now our attention is not just on a handful of these boulders, but we're now picking the outlets that we pay attention to based on how well they cater to our interests. So I'm a big college football guy, and I spend a lot of my time following Big 12, University of Texas, college football blogs. Yeah, Boise State. So I am much more interested right now in paying attention to what I would think of as micromedia outlets that cater to exactly what I'm looking for than I am in waiting for the Austin American Statesman to give me one article a day on University of Texas when I can get 100 articles instantly online. And so what's happened is our interest has scattered. The remaining media members that are left in newsrooms are so overloaded with the amount of pitches that are coming into them. We went out and saw Gloria McDonough-Taub, who used to run the Bullish on Books section at CNBC.com. And we say, Gloria, how many pitches are you getting in a normal day? And she said, on most days I get more than 1,000 people who are pitching me for coverage. I was like, how do you handle 1,000? She's like, most of the time I look through for publicists that I know, and I'll read those and I just bulk delete the rest. And so what's happening is those remaining media members are so overloaded, they're beginning to take more and more of a don't call us, we'll call you approach to PR. And so what that means is when they need an expert on Ebola, or when they need an expert on whatever the story of the day is, increasingly they are not waiting for pitches, they're going to Google or they're going to Twitter, and they're proactively looking for people who have written blog posts on those topics, experts that come up quickly in a search. And so what's happening right now for you guys that I think is really exciting is the worlds of PR and social media are really merging and becoming no longer siloed. And you guys are much more in control of the amount of inbound speaking, the amount of inbound PR that you're able to drive. Okay? What I want you guys to start to do is to make this transition in your mind from always having to get a radio interview or always having to get media coverage to reach an audience. What I want you to do is to start thinking of yourself as a media outlet. Here's what I mean about that. Your job right now, those of you that are looking to build a larger audience, to become a part of, to take Fascination Advantage, or for your coaching, or for your consulting, or to do the Anthem Builder, what we want to do is we want to start providing those people with valuable content. Great media outlets provide entertaining and informative content on a consistent basis to an audience that's interested in that topic area. Okay, and so what I want you guys to think about is, for your audience, what kind of information are they looking for? How are they interested in receiving that content? In other words, are they interested in a podcast? Are they interested in a blog? Are they interested in LinkedIn? Based on the kind of audience that you're trying to reach. And I'm going to walk through in this section very specifically the things that you can be thinking about there. But in many ways right now, you guys, if you can sort of flip this in your mind and start thinking, all right, instead of just providing my perspective, so what a lot of people do with their blog or their social media is, if you go back to this newspaper analogy, they think of it as if it's entirely an op-ed page. In other words, they fill their blog, oftentimes, you guys may have done this yourselves, it's all my perspective on things. And what happens is, as you're coming up in terms of building your platform, if you're not involving other people in what you're blogging about, what's happening is you're giving probably some really good ideas on your blog, but nobody knows to pay attention yet. It's like you're standing in an empty auditorium and you're giving really good information, but nobody knows to come in. And so where you guys are right now, or some of you, and I know I've heard from several people here that are really savvy in social media and are already doing a lot of this stuff. But what we want to be doing with your social media presence and your online presence is, how can we involve other people? In other words, how can we bring somebody else up on stage with you as part of an interview to where their audience follows them into that room and they hear you both talk, or they see some of your content, and when that person walks out, some of them stick around on your email list. Some of them stick around as followers on your Twitter account. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Let's talk about online brand audit. How many people here have a website? Okay. How many people here are proud of their website? Awesome. No, that's great. That's great. How many people here have a blog? Okay. How many people here on Twitter? How about LinkedIn? Facebook? Most people. Okay. Just curious there. So there are two levels to an online brand audit. All right? So there are either people that know to look for you by name. In other words, somebody's been referred to you, or they heard you give a speech, and they type in your name to Google. And I'm curious, how many of you, if I were to type your name into Google, how many of you could I get to real estate that you own online? Okay, so that's good. What I want you guys to think about, and what I'd like to have you do after you get back to your hotel or later, is put your name into Google and put yourself in the shoes of your best potential client who's been referred to you. And if they type your name in, they look, there's nothing on page one, or maybe there are a couple of media articles, but there's not real estate that you own on page one, they're not going to keep looking. I know a journalist is not going to keep looking. My guess is a potential client might spend a little while looking, but if they can't find you, you're losing opportunities. Those of you right now that aren't discoverable online or aren't discoverable even on your name, what we're doing is we're not only missing those people directly, we're also missing indirect leads, people that are searching for people that provide great information like you guys do. They don't know that you're the person yet, but they could really benefit from your insight. Okay? So around that direct audience, can you be found? For many of you, it's the best branding can be your name versus a business name. Reason why is because most people, if they're referred to you, are getting referred to you by name. There are exceptions to that. The conference, for example, is an exception in terms of the kind of real estate that you want to build. But everybody in this room should have your name, firstandlastname.com, owned, and that should go somewhere. In other words, it should redirect if you've got a different URL, but you need to have your name as a URL. Those of you that have kids, I would really encourage you to go ahead and grab URLs for them. So I've got a URL for my 5-year-old, my 7-year-old, somebody already grabbed it. So if you think about how valuable that real estate is right now for us, how valuable is it going to be for them 10 years from now?
Future is ruins.
Well, it's just, yeah, I mean, it's not ruined, but it would be valuable for them to have, of course.
Yeah, that's something that my husband faces. Like, I have a very unique last name, but his is a very common name in general. And like, he has the hyphen, but like nobody cares.
Yeah.
They want the one
Right.
word.
So when I get through to your website, so let's say I found you, okay? I've landed on your website. If I'm there, here's what I want you guys to start thinking about. There are a few levels to a website experience. All right, level one, which is the way that unfortunately most websites are, is brochure website. About the company, about me, services, contact. It is a brochure online. Okay? That's great if I'm already ready to hire you. Okay, so if I come in the door and I'm already sold, perfect. I know the phone number, I'm picking it up, I can call you. What percentage of people are coming in that are already ready to hire you? It's probably a certain amount, but my guess is there is also a large chunk that if you're not thinking about this next level, that we're losing. So I always give this example. So if you did an interview on NPR, all right, and let's say after that interview on NPR, you had 1,000 people that were so interested, you were so entertaining, that they searched your name and they came into the website. Of those 1,000, let's say 10%, let's say you did a great job, 10% are ready to buy whatever it is that you're offering. So if you've got that level one website, you've sold 100 widgets. Okay, those 10% were ready to buy. The other 900 were interested enough in your topic area to search your name and land on your site, but they're not ready to buy yet. What they're looking for is a reason to stick around. They're looking for value on that topic. So your job as a micromedia outlet is to figure out a way to extend their attention span with you. Okay? What I mean by that is, can we give them a reason to hop onto your email list? Everybody in this room, what I want you guys to leave with today is to start thinking about, what is my free offer to somebody? How can I provide value to them? This summer we did Project Fascination, which was a huge success for us around the book launch. We have another client, Katty Kay and Claire Shipman, whose book, The Confidence Code, came out. And when they released that book, we knew we were going to get tons of media. So Claire is with ABC News, Katty is with BBC. They know everybody in the media. It was, it's made our job easy, right? But they didn't have much of an online presence. And we needed to build up an email list for them. And so we created a confidence assessment alongside partners at Alter Endeavors in Austin. And that confidence assessment was free. It was based on research from Ohio State, and people could come in and figure out, do I have low confidence, medium confidence, or high confidence? Before every interview, we had the host take the assessment, and Katty and Claire talked to them about it on the air. Same thing we did with Sally. Before all of Sally's interviews, we had the host take the Fascination Advantage assessment, and then Sally would talk them through their results. And so what happens is, everybody that's listening to that interview is saying, wow, this is really interesting. Media loves the word free. And so whether you're blogging for somebody or you're giving an interview, if you've got something that's free, that's really valuable to that audience, they want to promote it like crazy. And so around the 3 months of that book's launch, we've had over 150,000 people take this confidence assessment on their website. And so they've gone from not having much of an email list, and now we've got this great list to work from. So that scale is thanks to Colbert and Good Morning America. And, so I'm not suggesting that that's going to happen for everybody. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because every speech that you do, every blog that you write, every guest post that you write, every interview you do, you're going in with two goals. One is certainly to provide entertaining and informative content for that opportunity. You're there to give them wow information. Your second goal is, going back to that auditorium analogy, I want as many people following you out the door from that interview as possible and following you into your auditorium. In other words, I want as many people as possible coming in and signing up for your list. The only reason people sign up for a list is perceived value from what they're going to get in exchange. So I want to give you guys a couple of quick examples of people that I think do this really well outside of Sally, because I know you guys know Sally's doing it very well. So on the Confidence Code website, did that turn off?
Power shut down.
Did it really? Okay, cool. So people come into this website, despite the number of emails that we got saying, where is the quiz, which Shelby and the team could talk about. The quiz is here, and the quiz is here. And so when people got there, they could instantly figure out, all right, I can take the confidence quiz, and for free, I'm going to get valuable information back. And so they came in and they did that. A guy named Michael Hyatt, some of you have probably heard of. He has a very popular leadership blog. He wrote a book called Platform. And what he does is he has this really good, very visible sign-up box here. Get my free ebook inside my toolbox, which basically explains the tools that he used to build up his blog. What used to be here was a workbook to build your life plan as a leader. Okay? So what I want you guys to be thinking about, it may not be an assessment based on the higher level assessment that we have to offer. So what I want you guys to be thinking about, is there a workbook that you can give people? Is there a free ebook that you can offer as a download? What works best is something that somebody coming in can immediately personalize in their life. And that's why an action plan, a workbook, something that they can take and put into practice, a 30-day plan. Tom Rath, I've heard a lot about Gallup the last couple days, is also our client. And we built a website for his new book called Eat, Move, Sleep. And when people came into that site, they were able to build a 30-day eat, move, sleep plan focused on wellness. And they were able to personalize it, and that was the focus for building his list. So what I want you guys to think about, we've got to build this audience that you own. It's not enough to have followers on Twitter. It's not enough to have likes on a Facebook page. You're renting space on those sites, okay? What we want you guys to do is we want you building a list that you own, a connection with that audience that you control. Yes?
Can I offer just another suggestion
Sure.
for list building? Is the box, like what's on the other site and the form here are really good, and a landing page I think performs even better. So having essentially a sales page for your free offer with a form at the bottom, mine performs around 50%, which means if 1,000 people visit my website, 500
That's
of them
awesome.
are going on to my email list.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and so I direct people to the landing page instead of my home page, and then they get what they want.
This is an example right here. So this is a post that Caddy wrote on LinkedIn. And at the bottom, the call to action, in addition to the book, is to the assessment. So if I get to the bottom of that, I got free continuation of the value. So she's putting in time here to write over at LinkedIn. But again, she's trying to walk out the door and have this post was seen by 150,000 people. And so she wants as many of those people to follow her out the door as possible. Think about the data that comes from this. So we can test LinkedIn versus Entrepreneur versus Inc. versus Fast Company. This is a lot of what we're doing with Sally and her team, is figuring out, okay, Sally doesn't have much time available. And if she's going to be writing guest posts, they need to have the maximum amount of impact. And so we're able to track through the back-end system that they built so well exactly how many people come in from each interview. Now, where I feel like many of you are is we just want to get out there right now. And it's all about trying to get the message out in as many places as possible. So around that, let's talk about that for a minute. So within social media, we talked about the fact that there's almost an infinite amount of things that you could be doing with your time. For many of you in this room, what I think of is right now, you're in this relationship building phase within social media. So where a lot of people spin their wheels, put in a lot of time and burn out and throw their hands up in the air and they just say social media is not worth it, or nobody engages, or nobody's coming to my blog. It goes back to that example of sort of being in your own auditorium and you're just throwing your stuff out there, but your friends and family are in the corner just so worn out by it that they can't hear it anymore. And so what we need to do with your social media is we need to focus not on websites and platforms that are what I think of as relationship sustainers, which would be sites like Facebook. LinkedIn used to be in this category. Facebook's a place where we go to be with either friends, to stay in touch with friends and family, or teams or bands that we already know we like. All right? I'm not taking chances on Facebook on a new author or a new consultant. I'm only there to interact with people that I'm already familiar with. And so what I see so many people do is they'll start a Facebook page and they'll just go crazy on it for 6 months or a year, and you're not sort of expanding out beyond your audience. Facebook is a great place to be for brands that are well known. For individuals that are starting to build a larger platform, it is not the best place to be. We represent Chicken Soup for the Soul. That brand is perfect for Facebook. Their Facebook page is about 1.2 million. And it's a perfect place because people know exactly what they're going to get from that page. They're going to get daily inspiration. So for many of you in this room, I want to walk through kind of a hit list. So if you only have time for one thing, it's going to be a blog. You've heard a lot of stories, likely blogging's dead, everybody's blogging, etc. Blog is hands down the most important engine for your brand. The blog, one quick thing, I see a lot of people that will have a blog off-site. So in other words, they have their website over here and then they've set up on WordPress or Blogspot a separate blog. Your blog should be an engine for visibility, search engine optimization for your website. It lives on your website. Do not have it off-site. Okay? So when somebody comes into a blog post, I want them coming into the infrastructure of your website. Very, very important. Otherwise, you're building all this SEO value on a site that oftentimes you're renting from WordPress that you don't even own. Okay? So when you're building an online platform, think of it as if you're laying bricks in a foundation on a house. And if you do it a bunch of different places, it's like you're building a bunch of different houses and they're all half finished. So you want to have, with your website, you want to have one central home base. Website/blog. And it's great if we're on Twitter. It's great if you're doing PR. It's great if you're speaking. It's also great if I had better handwriting. But what we're doing is we're wanting all of these roads to lead to one place.
Where's podcast?
Yeah, so podcast would be another thing that will be part of what we talk about here. Very important opportunity for a lot of people. So all roads need to lead to one central home base website for you. And the question is, when I come into your site, are you giving me that level 1 information, or are you giving me level 2, which is inspiring me to actually join your list? Okay? The third level is your content interesting enough that I want to then take it and share it with my network? All right? If we go back to this idea of micromedia, everybody in this room is a micromedia outlet. If your audience likes what you have to say, they're going to take it and talk to their audience about it. Okay? So the blog on your website needs to be first priority. All right? There are 3 kinds of content I want to see on your blog. What most people do, as I mentioned, going back to the newspaper analogy, most people, it is op-ed after op-ed. It's their perspective on typically evergreen topics. 5 ways to be more interesting, 5 ways to be a better leader, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in this relationship building phase, one of the most effective things that you can do on your blog is use it as a relationship building tool, et cetera. Okay? What I want you guys to do is think about starting an interview or spotlight series on your blog. Okay? Interview one person every week or every 2 weeks, depending on your schedule, for a year. What's going to happen there is when you interview people or when you do this kind of spotlight series, you're giving yourself a reason to reach out to somebody without asking for something. You're giving yourself a reason to reach out and say, hey, I'm doing a spotlight series of the top leaders in HR, and I noticed you're clearly one of those, and I'd love to have you as part of that series. And what happens is people aren't used to getting that kind of request other than don't send that request. I mean, Sally would be fine, but generally we wouldn't be fielding those kind of requests for somebody that's there. But a lot of people are not yet to the point where they're getting a lot of those requests. And so what it does is it gives you an opportunity to interact with somebody that you're wanting to build a relationship with without calling and asking for something. You're calling and you're offering to give them a spotlight. And so at the end of the year, if you've done that, what's happened is every time you interview somebody, regardless of how many people see that blog post, you're building a relationship with that person. And oftentimes what they're thinking in their mind is, how can I reciprocate? What happens a lot of times is you'll invite somebody and they'll say, yeah, come interview on my blog too. And so you're inviting them up on your stage and you're giving them a reason to point for their audience, for them to point and say, hey, go check that interview out over there. So around that interview series, think about who are the key influencers, who are the referral bases for you, who are potential clients, and how can you use your blog as a way to not only build relationships with them, but provide good value in your topic area. Second category that I want you to focus on. David Meerman Scott, who's written several really, really good books on the changing world of PR and marketing, is probably the person that I would say is an inspiration for a lot of the way that we think about new media. He coined a term called newsjacking, which is taking what's in the news cycle right now, and connecting your message to it. You guys may remember last year during the Super Bowl, or it may have been 2 years ago, the Superdome lost power. And I don't remember the exact tweet, but Oreo had, through their social media account, this amazing tweet about connecting the power outage with the product. And they got so many retweets and so many articles about that. That was a live social media example of that. When we go back to what I talked about earlier, which is media outlets more and more looking online for experts, what happens is when you connect your message to what's going on in the news, new research in your industry, or something in the national news cycle, what you're doing is you're widening your net around that topic. All right? 4 of the last 5 clients we've had on national TV, the call has come inbound from a producer who found a blog post that author wrote on a very newsworthy topic and called us. I'll give you a quick example of this. One of our clients, a guy named Sanjay Sangoi, and he writes novels, but his novels are based on his background in high finance. And so Carl Icahn, for a while, you guys may remember this, was battling Michael Dell for control of the Dell board in Austin. And Sanjay wrote a post for Huffington Post that was titled, Carl Icahn and the Power of Activist Investing. Okay, and then he wrote about essentially what Icahn was doing there. We got a call the next morning from a producer with The Closing Bell with Maria Bartiromo. That afternoon, Sanjay was on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange doing an interview with Maria Bartiromo on that topic of activist investing and what Icahn was doing. Now, we could have had a publicist calling that producer all day, every day for a month. We would have never gotten that hit. So what happened in that case is that producer needed somebody to talk about that specific topic. And because Sanjay wrote a really thoughtful piece, and because he connected it back to that very topical discussion, he widened his net around that topic, and that media request came inbound. So going back to this idea of you guys controlling more and more of your PR, what I want you guys to be thinking about is how can I connect my message to what's being discussed in my industry? Whether it's breaking news or breaking research, those sorts of things work really, really well. Okay? The other thing to think about is so that journalist found Sanjay on HuffPost and then clicked through to his website. What I want you guys to think about is if a journalist comes into your website, how easy are you making it on them to get in touch with you? So what a lot of people do is they have a contact form because they don't want to give out their email, and it's name, email, reason for reaching out. If I'm a journalist on deadline, I'm never going to fill that out. Okay? When I submit one of those, I don't know where it's going, right? I'd never really expect a response. What I encourage you guys to do on your website, add a press room, so a press tab. And within that press tab, have contact information for journalists if they want to reach out to you. Have links to recent media coverage. One of the things that you probably have seen on Sally's website and on the How to Fascinate site is we put press credentials pretty front and center. So in other words, we've got #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller, #2 New York Times bestseller. We put those things front and center. Very few things provide the kind of instant credibility that a media logo does on a website. And so as you start to get coverage, use that to your advantage with the first impression that you're giving on your website. I'd love, in addition to you guys having this press room, by the way, on the press room, there would be 3 sections. Contact information, recent coverage, which would provide links to recent media coverage you've gotten. If you don't have any media coverage, don't put that section in and you can add it as you get it. But hopefully after today, you're going to start to get some. And then below that, you would have a download section. So a high-res headshot, your corporate logo, a press kit, if you have it. If I'm a journalist and I'm coming in and I see, oh, Susan's been on Forbes or she's written a guest post for Fast Company, what I'm thinking as the journalist is they've already vetted her, she's good to go. Okay? If I'm a journalist and I come in and I don't see any media coverage at all, I'm wondering, all right, is this person really the right fit? And I'm probably clicking through to the next site. Okay? So as you get more and more coverage, start to add that in. The great news is because newsrooms are smaller than they've ever been before, they need content like they've never needed it before. And so a lot of people for years have been nervous about pitching HuffPost to write a guest post or pitching whatever the industry publication is in your trade association. And a lot of those places are really more interested in you coming in and offering good content than you would imagine. So what I would encourage you guys to think about, I talked about the blog as the first thing. In an ideal scenario, you've got 2 different blog channels. You've got the one that you own on your website, which is our relationship building tool, and then you've got a third-party blog with Forbes or with CMO or with HR.com or Business Insider or Fast Company or wherever it might be. Those are not easy gigs to get, but more and more they are looking for contributors. And many of you, if you start on kind of your vertical, so your industry's vertical, that trade pub, my guess is on their website, they're looking for contributors and they're looking for people that can offer up great content. And that would be a great place for you to also be with your content. So I mentioned on your blog I like 3 types of content. The first is interviews or spotlight series. Trust me on that one. That one is such a good relationship building tool. The second one is newsjacking. The third one is evergreen. And this is where we go into your core expertise. This is where you're starting to give out some of your IP. And this is where you're able to test. Tara was mentioning that she starts to test a lot of times ideas connected to her books with blog posts, and she can see what are certain people responding to, what are they not responding to. It can be a great way to figure out, kind of what they're responding to. Do you mind handing me some water? So evergreen content I think works really, really well there. Thanks. If you're on HuffPost or you're on Business Insider or a really visible site like that, newsjacking posts are really the way to go with those. And that can really make you much more visible to media members. So after the blog, what's next? What we're seeing right now is typically Twitter is the answer to this. And a lot of people cringe or recoil at the suggestion of Twitter. What I'm going to do, I've written about a 30-page ebook that I've got on my website for free that I'll just send to everybody that's here, and it's all about Twitter strategy. And it's all about Twitter strategy for higher-end experts, like the people in this room. What it is, if you only are going to do a few things on the site, what should you be doing? So if Facebook is the family reunion, Twitter is the cocktail party. Twitter is the place where we go to talk to people we don't yet know about topics that we're mutually interested in. For a lot of people, that's TV shows. For some of us, it's college football. For some of us, it's management consulting. For Sally and the work that we do with her, it is how to help people see themselves in their best value and how to show that to others around them. Okay? And so there's an infinite number of different topics. If you imagine getting started on Twitter, it's like walking in the door to the world's largest convention center. And as far as the eye can see, there are people clumped up in circles like we do at cocktail parties. And what's happening is there's a circle for politics. There's a circle for how to fascinate. There's a circle for just think of any topic in the world. What most people do when they get started on Twitter is they walk in the door and they just start talking. Okay? There's nobody in front of them. They're not in a circle. They're just kind of tweeting things out there. And it's just like walking in the door to a party and just talking. Nobody knows that you're there or to pay attention to you. You've got to walk up to somebody and say, Gary, how was your day today? Or Tim, loved your piece in Fast Company yesterday. Or Shelby, are you excited about going to Universal Studios tomorrow? So like that sort of stuff. So Twitter is all about being really intentional about who you're connecting with. There are 4 audiences that I want you to focus on Twitter. Audience number 1, I would like to see you make a list of the top 25 to 50 journalists and bloggers in your topic area. The noisemakers, the tastemakers in the media in your topic area. And I want you to follow those people on Twitter. Second category, authors, experts, influencers. Okay? These are people that have built a large audience in their auditorium that you would like to get to know. Okay? Third category, groups, organizations, this is all in the book, by the way, that I'll give to you guys. Groups, organizations, associations, businesses that you want to work with, potential clients or potential referral basis for you. The fourth category would be individuals on Twitter that are interested in your specific topic area. What I want you to do is I want you to use Twitter as a proactive way to build relationships with people. You read an article on Fast Company that you really like, a tweet might go out saying, love this new piece from @SallyHogshead on how to fascinate at work, and then link to it. Thanks so much, Sally. And if you didn't know Sally, what's going to happen is Sally on her smartphone just got a pop-up from your tweet saying, Rusty Shelton just mentioned you in a tweet, and she sees it, who's Rusty Shelton? And she clicks on it. She might go to my bio and probably is going to thank me. And now that first comment is probably not going to be the biggest relationship builder ever, but what it does is it starts to be a magnet for you with people you want to get to know. Social media is not about being everything to everyone, just like using your fascination advantage is not, and your archetype is not about being everything to everyone. We want to use social media to build rifle shot relationships with people that can then turn around and either provide interesting content for your audience, or turn around and send their audience over to join your email list or to be a part of what you're doing. Okay? So Twitter, while it gets a lot of eye rolls at first, really we've seen it be hugely important. There was a study that Cision and George Washington University did among journalists that said, where do you go when you're researching stories? 89% say they go to blogs to research stories. 89%, 52%, and meaning HuffPost or Forbes or wherever else. 52% said they go to Twitter. And so Twitter can be also a good place if you're following those journalists within a list on Twitter. So Twitter allows you to build lists that you can filter out certain groups. What a lot of journalists are doing is they're saying, hey, I need to talk to a cardiologist in Boston, or I need to talk to a management consulting expert. So they're putting actual live queries out on Twitter. How many people in this room subscribe to a site called Help a Reporter or have heard of it? So I think one of the best inventions in PR of the last 10 years, a guy named Peter Shankman created a site called Help a Reporter. And what it is it is an email that goes out. How many times a day does it go out? 3 times a day with live media queries, organized by topic. And it's basically the journalist telling you, if you are a cardiologist in Boston that specializes in high blood pressure, I want you to pitch me because I need to talk to you right now. And so what I encourage every single person in this room, it's free to subscribe. If you go to Help a Reporter and you subscribe to this email blast, 3 times a day, just scan it. It's organized by topic area, health, business, sports. For your topic area, just scan the queries. I had a guy that I gave a talk to 2 years ago. The next week did a pre-interview from Good Morning America based on signing up for this email list. So it's not just kind of rinky-dink outlets that use it. It's a great way for you to immediately start looking for opportunities for yourself. All right, so blog, Twitter. From there, most of you with a business audience, LinkedIn, I think is an important place to be. So LinkedIn used to be in the Facebook camp of, stay connected with people you already know. They are desperately trying to move towards Twitter, which is keep us there and help us to get information from people that we don't know. You may have noticed they have an influencer program at LinkedIn where they have 500 influencers worldwide that provide content. So they're writing blogs on the site. They just opened up a new publish feature where anybody on LinkedIn now can publish posts. And LinkedIn has an editorial team that we work pretty closely with that are based in Manhattan. And what they're doing, in addition to right now those 500 influencers get crazy visibility worldwide, but they're starting to look among the one-off posts from individual LinkedIn members, and they're looking for ones that are getting traction, and they're spotlighting those. So we're seeing some of those start to break out a bit. If you're writing a blog post on your own site, I encourage you to cross-post it over to LinkedIn and then provide a link right at the bottom of your post for whatever your call to action is. Come to my site to download my free workbook, or come to my site to, whatever it might be. So LinkedIn is an important place. Tim brought up podcasts. We're huge fans of podcasts right now. Rory Vaden, who was here the other day, is also our client. And Rory started a podcast. He's now on episode, I think, 80 or so. And he is consistently ranked in the top 100 business podcasts on iTunes. His podcast has been going for about a year and a half, not very long. And he's already in that ranking. Going back to that interview idea that I talked about for the blog, this is taking that and elevating it a level where, as opposed to just an email interview that you might do for a blog post, now you're talking with somebody on a podcast. This is an area where there's a lot of demand for content, and there's very few people that are willing to put in the time to do a podcast. It takes some education, but it's really not that hard to do it. So for most people, it is using Skype and a recording technology to record an interview with somebody, and then working with sometimes a sound engineer, sometimes an audio editor, or learning it yourself to take that audio and turn it into an actual podcast episode. We have an audio engineer that we work with out of Chicago that does this at a really reasonable rate. If you guys decide to do this, and I can provide that referral to you to go directly to him. The key to a good podcast is both good guests and good sound. So a lot of people don't spend the money on a good microphone or the right kind of recording, and as a result, if I'm in my car and the sound is off, or I'm just not going to stick with it. So if you're going to do it well. And I would encourage you guys to think about that across everything you do online. If you got an old YouTube video that's up that doesn't reflect your best quality, if I'm a journalist and I'm thinking about booking you, I'm going to find that. So Gary was talking about filming us for this video. If this video doesn't come out great, I'm not going to want it on YouTube because maybe a producer finds it at some point. So they are looking for reasons not to book you, okay? If you give them reasons not to book you, clients are looking for reasons not to hire you when they go online. Don't give them reasons to do that. Let's take what we've learned with our archetypes and all of the great information we've got the last couple of days, and let's make sure our online brand is reflecting that. Facebook, I think, is a great, stick with your Facebook profile, but I would not spend a ton of time right now, most of you, on a Facebook page. The reason why is because likely your clients are more interested in interacting with you as part of an email list, a newsletter, or your blog, or other places as opposed to Facebook, and it's almost certainly not going to be a place where you're building intentional new relationships with people. So I really would rank it way near the bottom for most of the people in this room. Data. So a lot of people ignore data right now, and data, we have access to more of it than ever before. Sally yesterday talked about one of the things that we do with all of our clients. Going into a media interview or going into a pre-interview, it is doing as much research as possible on the person you're about to talk to. You have it. You have access to it on Twitter. In many cases, depending on the privacy settings, you've got access to a LinkedIn profile as well. So use that to your advantage and use that to show them that you've done background research on them. From a client development perspective, one of the things that we do when we place, so if Sally, for example, writes a guest post on Fast Company, that post is getting shared hundreds, if not thousands of times over to social media. So what we're interested in is not just the exposure initially and the number of people who have shared it. What we're tracking is, all right, if 1,000 people shared this over to Twitter, who are those 1,000 people? And Twitter actually gives you access to that information. So when you write a blog post, and I don't know about you guys, but if I'm reading an article and I actually go share it on my Twitter account, I was blown away by this article, and I'm really, really interested in that topic area. It's like I'm raising my hand saying, I'm interested in what this person has to say. And so if you guys think about that from a prospecting and client development perspective, if you were able to look at the number of people that shared your post, of those 1,000 people, maybe 6 of them are VP level and up, and those are the first 6 people that you're reaching out to say, hey, I saw you share my Fast Company post. Thank you so much for doing that. I wonder if there's, in your base, I'm going to be in Burbank next week. Would love to grab a cup of coffee with you, or would love to set up a phone call to learn more about what you guys are doing. And so it becomes this way for you to figure out who's interested in what you have to offer. So data, I think, is a huge area of opportunity, and Twitter right now gives us access to more of it than almost any other site. So I want to make sure that we have some time for your questions. So let me stop there and see of the stuff that I've talked about here, and I want to bring in Sarah and Shelby and Lauren as well to answer questions from their perspective. But I'm really curious what questions you might have as it relates to social media and marketing.